Good morning and welcome to Channel X TV. Delighted to be joined today by Rob Hollands, not least of which, because just for a change, we're going to talk about the whisky and spirits industry. So don't worry, it is going to be about e-commerce as well. But welcome, Rob, and you're CEO of the Metacask marketplace. Tell us a little bit about yourself and about Metacask and what you do.
Hey Chris, thank you. Good to see you and good to meet everyone and be with you. So I'm CEO of Metacask. I'm actually relatively new into the business. I'm 2 months into that role, but have known the company for the last year or so.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a whirlwind first couple of months, but absolutely brilliant business. And we're focused really on revolutionising the spirits industry, which, as you know, as your viewers know, is a very traditional, steeped in tradition as an industry. So it's a tough gig to digitally transform. But one of the first ways we are doing that is we've launched the Metacask marketplace, which is a marketplace for consumers and shoppers to be able to come on and take ownership of luxury spirits. And then potentially trade those spirits in the future, all via NFTs and blockchain, which I know we're going to get into as we carry on the conversation today.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. So you kind of mentioned consumers buying, but who is the main buyer and what's their kind of profile? And perhaps more importantly, who are the sellers? Are they the distilleries? Are they other collectors that have got spirits that they've stashed for years that are highly valuable? Is it businesses that in the past would have kind of traded offline and are now trading on the Metacask marketplace? Who are the customers and who are the suppliers?
It's a whole mix of those. So we're working with some distilleries directly. So you could take ownership of a cask directly, kind of in the depths of Scotland. You could be the owner of a cask, and some pretty significant casks. You know, our biggest auction today was over $2 million. Well, not an auction, sorry. Our biggest kind of trade to date was over $2 million for a Macallan cask. So you could be a distillery selling directly to consumers. You could be a consumer sat in their home with a bottle that you've had there that you've listed on the marketplace for trading, or one of the big kind of brands that your audience will have heard of in the kind of spirit space.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the lucky person that goes and buys a Scottish castle in the Glens somewhere and finds a seller with these half dozen bottles of whiskey that are 100 years old, and the delight of getting them on the marketplace and seeing what they're worth.
Yeah,
I want to dig a little deeper into kind of how you digitize the whiskey and spirits industries. As you've mentioned, these are really old industries set in their ways almost. And they've all got supply chains, which for a lot that they'll end up in supermarkets at the low end, or the higher end specialist retailers in London for the more expensive brands. But how do you go about digitizing this in the first place?
Well, that's one of the things it's actually spurred us to create a secondary product. So we've got the marketplace, which is where you can go on and trade, as I've talked about. But we've had to build really a secondary product called Tracker, which is going back right into those origins that you talk about and trying to, as a product's born, we're creating digital twins of those products and tracking them right the way through the supply chain for exactly that reason, that it is an older industry. And there's been a lot of, proof of ownership is a really big thing. It's one of the kind of fundamental for us around utilizing technologies like NFTs and blockchain is to have that proof of ownership, and that's been difficult in this market. Things around ownership, authentication, transparency. A lot of what we're layering in, particularly with the Tracker side of things, is to drive that through to the marketplace. And you will have seen that in the other marketplaces that you talk about. That pair of sneakers or that fashion item. How do I prove it's a genuine garment? And then how do I see that in its future resales or its entire history? And that's one of the things we're trying to crack.
So I'm really interested in this. I want to talk, you mentioned NFTs. I'm going to come back to them in a minute, but I just want to, out of curiosity, find out. I know it's incredibly difficult sometimes to prove the provenance of a 150-year-old bottle of whiskey. How do you do that? And then how are you confident enough to translate that provenance into an online certificate so that forever after you know it's right? And what happens if something turns out to be even better than when it was first authenticated? How do you then update it online without sort of corrupting it? I mean, I'm assuming once you've got an online digital certificate, it's going to live forever.
Yeah, I guess so the way that kind of works, the point in time when we record that piece of information, that can never be changed. That's one of the real beauties of this technology. But we can, of course, write new records if new information surfaces or if ownership changes. So that's one of those things. The really easy place for us in things that are being created now, that are being born new, if you like a new whiskey cask being laid down. That's something that we can digitalize from the off. And in the future, in 50 years' time, when you look back at that cask, there will be a digital twin of it, and you'll be able to see its whole journey. And the older stuff, as it's authenticated, we're creating that kind of record at that point of time. And there's lots of different ways you can go about authenticating the same as other industries. We'll get as much history as we can on that product and associate that and create the digital versions of that. Now, we're obviously talking about the spirits industry now, and that's where we've started. And as I said, no mean feat. But there's lots of these challenges in other industries. You look at things like property and housing and real estate, that kind of market. Fashion, we've already talked about. Lots of these industries have got the same consumer challenges. Is it a genuine product? What's the history of that product? How can I make resale easy? What happens at the end of the product's life? And what can technology, and if we start to create these records, what can we do with that? And we're doing lots of work in that space. We're really, this is about digitalizing physical assets. And if we can digitalize physical assets in the spirits industry, we can do the same in any industry.
This is interesting because you're already talking about when a cask is laying down, getting a digital twin of that cask. But at some point, it's likely that cask in 20 years' time or 50 years' time will then be converted into bottles. How do you track sort of a liquid that was in a cask to a liquid that was in a bottle and follow it through its journey? And obviously, again, when do you track it? Do you track it when it's in the final aging cask, or do you go further up the process to even before then?
We're the platform we've built is trying to track in the most ideal state. We'll track absolutely everything. So right back to the raw ingredients. When the cask itself is manufactured with the cooperages, we'd ideally track every stage of that. That's the kind of dream. You'd see all of that information assigned to that cask, and you're right, when it's bottled X years later, 20, 30, however many years later, we want to carry that same information through to, we'd refer to them as the kind of parent and children. That cask is the parent, and as these children are created in the bottles themselves, we give each of them an identity that carries that parent information through, almost like a DNA stamp to the bottles. And that's been my history. I've done a lot of work in the Internet of Things, connected products, connected packaging space, and have a real passion for that. If we can connect the physical bottles themselves, and as a consumer, you can tap that bottle or scan that bottle and see that whole journey. That's a really rich experience, and again applies to any industry.
Yeah, so I want to go back to NFTs that you mentioned. Now, they're one of those things that there's a lot of confusion about them. So I'm going to put you on the spot and ask if you can kind of define what an NFT is in words that my 87-year-old mum would understand.
Yeah, so an NFT, or non-fungible token, which sounds even more confusing if you're explaining that to your 87-year-old mum. It really is. I kind of think of it as a deed or a smart contract. You might reference the kind of deeds you'd have on your own house, and it's the digital version of that. There's lots of unique properties, which is perhaps where it starts to get more confusing. But the fact that these kind of can't be replicated, they're immutable, they're unique proof of ownerships, or certainly in the way that we're using them, proof of ownerships. So they allow you to take an asset and say, I actually truly own this asset and have recorded that ownership. And that can't ever change at that point in time. I might pass that ownership on.
So this is proving provenance for the future?
Exactly, yeah. And where we've got a real passion in it, the other thing, like if your mum would have read it in the news, I'm sure, around this, using it to take ownership of digital assets, which is, there's been lots of kind of novel use cases in that space. But then, of course, it's what's the value, where the confusion has come is what's the value of that asset that you're taking ownership of. And of course, we've got the benefit of what you're taking ownership of, and certainly in the spirit space, that physical asset has a true value. So having proof of that ownership in an industry where perhaps proving the ownership has been slightly more confusing or very paper-based, or kind of traditional and not so innovative, this brings some real transformation and innovation.
So this is really interesting. And let's assume I've owned a bottle of 200, 300 pounds whiskey. I've got the NFT. I'm going to sell it on your marketplace. How do I transfer the NFT, or is there a new NFT created for the new owner? How does it actually work in the spirits industry on Metacask?
Yeah, so you would list your product on our marketplace. You are listed as the kind of owner, and you can then transfer that ownership over. So there will always be a record of your ownership, and that's not your personal details out there on the web for everyone to look at. But it could be traced back to, we often refer to the term as wallet, but it could be traced back to you, or a digital identity of you. And you can then pass that ownership on to someone else, and a transaction then has to occur to take that ownership, much like would happen in the kind of physical world, but removes all of those issues in the physical world. As has ownership actually happened? Is it paper based? Where's that piece of paper that proves you own that piece of artwork, or you own that whiskey cask or whiskey bottle? NFTs really, and what we're doing on the blockchain is just digitalizing that ownership, and that's really powerful. That's an area people have struggled to do that trading online, and now. And
I'm kind of imagining that there'll be some celebrities out there that one day they'll be selling theirs, and having an NFT to prove a celebrity owned it will just add even more value than the intrinsic value of the spirits itself.
Exactly, yeah, and value actually is a really interesting thing. So one of the areas we're looking at, and it's driven by brands. All of these brands. Look at what Nike's doing in the space. Look at what companies like Diageo and Johnny Walker are doing in the space, and they're trying to add value beyond the actual product itself. And if we create these digital versions of the product, we can create added value. You're tapping into your Johnny Walker bottle, or your spirits bottle could suddenly unlock a unique moment with the master distiller that you wouldn't get by just owning the physical asset. By owning a digital version as well, you can unlock other things. That might be loyalty, memberships into this special club. And that applies again kind of across industry. But what other value can we add beyond as you said, the intrinsic value of the liquid in the bottle, or the bottle itself? We've got an absolutely lovely piece of work we're about to launch next month on the marketplace for an Irish whiskey, where they've created this unique artwork. It's 500 bottles. The artists have actually painted the 500 bottles of Muriel in situ. And as well as taking ownership of the great product itself, you're taking ownership of a unique piece of artwork that does have some true value.
This is really fascinating. But so I've got to ask, what's next for Metacask? Where do you see yourself taking the business in the future?
we're on a journey of kind of scaling and going to other markets. We're just back from a kind of launch in the US. We're UK based, UK and Switzerland based at the minute. So US is a big market for us. There's a lot of demand in China for both spirits and a product like ours. So that kind of market domination. I've got a real job to do to make sure we're optimizing our product and market fit, and having these discussions adds into what we're building and our view on the world. And like we started off with the marketplace and quickly realized we needed a platform behind the scenes to manage all of that tracking and the supply chain side of things. We'll continue to build products that kind of deliver on our vision.
And I've got one final question, which I'm sorry I have to ask. For anyone that's watching this and that they're sitting looking at their drinks cabinet and thinking, I've got this bottle, maybe it was Grandad's bottle, don't like whiskey, never opened it, wondering what the value is, should they be coming to you to get an NFT, or should they wait until they're ready to sell the bottle?
I could certainly come and have a chat to us. But I'd wait until they're ready to part with that bottle. And I mean, even if you don't, I absolutely I love the packaging. I love the kind of history and even the bottle design itself. These things can feel like a piece of artwork in the home. I'll admit it, I'm not a huge whiskey drinker yet. I'm working on it, but yes, you don't have to love the liquid inside to appreciate the kind of bottle and the history that sits behind some of these bottles.
Well, congratulations, Rob. Really interesting, and looking forward to coming back in the future and hearing your growth and some more exciting projects like the Irish Art Project. So thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, absolutely brilliant, and love your site and all your content and what you're doing, and we'll keep you posted.